So in a recent episode of Celebrity Big Brother, former White House aide and contestant Omarosa discussed why she believed Mike Pence was less preferable than Donald Trump in the event Donald Trump were to be impeached. Now, her reasoning was that even though she's a religious person herself, she believes that Mike Pence is kind of out there because he literally believes that Jesus talks to him. If Mike Pence literally believes that Jesus is talking to him, that's not religion. That's just a level of delusion that's terrifying for someone with that much power to have. Now, this catalyzed a discussion on The View where Joy Behar basically echoed that same sentiment because it's true, and Fox News didn't take too kindly to what she said. In fact, there were a lot of right-wing SJWs who were triggered by that discussion that they had on The View.
The panel on The View mocking Vice President Mike Pence for saying that he talks to Jesus. Watch.
I think when you have a Mike Pence that now sort of puts this religious veneer on things and calls people values voters, I think we're in a dangerous situation. I'm a faithful person, but I don't know that I want my vice president, speaking in tongues and having Jesus speak to him.
Like I said before,
I don't know if I want that.
It's one thing to talk to Jesus. It's another thing when Jesus talks to you. It's called mental illness, if I'm not correct.
Right,
Hearing voices.
Pastor Robert Jeffress is a senior pastor at First Baptist Church and a faith advisor to President Trump. Pastor Jeffress, thanks for coming on this morning. I'm sure that you're having a reaction just hearing that again. What is it?
Well, look, let's just go ahead and say what we all know is true. If Joy Behar had attacked a devout Muslim for his faith, ABC would have fired her in a nanosecond. But, you know, to the left, when it comes to attacking conservative Christians, it is always open season. And, you know, I'm often asked, why is it that evangelicals supported a secular candidate like Donald Trump by the largest margin in history? This is the reason. Christians are tired of being bullied for their faith in the public square. They wanted an administration who would respect rather than ridicule their beliefs. And in many ways, the election of Donald Trump and Mike Pence was a reaction against these kind of despicable attacks upon people's faith.
Why do you think that they have such a problem with the vice president and his beliefs?
Well, scratch beneath the surface or read what they've said in the past, and it's very clear. Mike Pence has committed the unpardonable sin when it comes to the left, and that is he still maintains the personal belief that marriage should be between a man and a woman. And look, everybody doesn't agree with that perspective. He understands that, but you can hardly call that an extreme perspective when it's the belief of the three major world religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, which have taught that for years, thousands of years. And look, this once again shows the hypocrisy of the left. The left cries for tolerance, and yet they are the most intolerant people when it comes to beliefs with which they disagree.
You could almost measure the butthurt in that video. So he states, if Joy Behar had attacked a devout Muslim for his faith, ABC would have fired her in a nanosecond. But for the left, when it comes to attacking conservative Christians, it's always open season. First and foremost, if anyone from any religion claims that they hear a voice talking to them that's God, that's not religion. That means there's an underlying mental illness that's happening that needs to be addressed. And this argument that the left is more hard on Christians than Muslims is incredibly disingenuous because evangelical Christians make up the overwhelming majority of the country, and they also have a substantial amount of sway over policy because they control every single branch of government. So if you're literally pushing for and implementing policies that affect all of our lives, then be prepared to face a lot of backlash. We don't have Muslims who are in there pushing their religion on us. Hence why we focus more on Christians in the United States. Context matters. If you lived in Saudi Arabia and you were an atheist, of course you'd focus more on Muslims there than Christians. If you lived in Egypt, you would focus more on Muslims there if you were an atheist than their Christian minority. It's just because the context is different. So to say that, oh, well, we're harder on Christians, well, if you're going to shove your religion down our throats via policy, yeah, we're going to speak out. Now, he also states here, Christians are tired of being bullied for their faith in the public sphere. Nobody is trying to bully you. You're the ones trying to impose your fundamentalist views on everyone else. If you didn't do that, then we wouldn't be, quote, bullying you and pushing back. But really, he wants us to shut up and take it as he shoves his religion down our throats. No, it doesn't work that way. You can't claim that you're being bullied if we're pushing back against your imposition of your religious views on us. That's not bullying. That's just us defending ourselves. But since we're defending ourselves, we're the bullies. He also states that the left doesn't like Mike Pence because he still maintains the personal belief that marriage should be between a man and a woman. And he also says you can hardly call it an extreme perspective when it's a belief of the three major world religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, which have taught that for years. Well, first of all, I don't care what any religion says about gay marriage. Religion should not be used to justify bigotry. And again, Mike Pence could be against gay marriage all he wants to be. I don't care. But it doesn't stop there. He's not just personally opposed to gay marriage. He actually tries to codify discrimination against LGBT people into law. So when he was the governor of Indiana, he literally signed a bill into law that made it legal for businesses to be able to discriminate against members of the LGBT community. So his personal beliefs may be inherently wrong and bigoted, but that's not my concern. You could believe anything you want to believe personally. I don't care. But what I care about is when those beliefs leave his head and they get codified into law, when they end up becoming policies that screw over the LGBT community. And clearly, since Mike Pence is Donald Trump's VP, he's having an impact on Donald Trump, who wasn't really that anti-gay. He was anti-gay, he was bigoted, but he wasn't vociferously anti-gay like Mike Pence. And now Donald Trump's administration is rolling back protections for the LGBT community. He's making sure that Christian doctors are able to refuse service to gay and lesbian patients if they morally object to homosexuality or someone's gender identity. So his antiquated beliefs aren't just staying in his head. It's not just a personal belief anymore. It's affecting policy. It's affecting people's lives. So that's why the ladies on The View were having a discussion about it. It's because it's a legitimate conversation to be having about the vice president of the United States. They're not talking about Jenny in South Carolina who wears her cross every day and reads her Bible. We don't give a shit about people like that. We care about your religion when it starts to affect policy. Get it through your head. He also says the left calls for tolerance, and they're the most intolerant when it comes to the beliefs with which they disagree. Right, so even though the left is more tolerant than the right, there are limits to our tolerance. So I tolerate the fact that you may have an antiquated belief about gay marriage. You may disagree with homosexuality, but I don't have to tolerate you discriminating against me and making sure that your worldview is codified into law. That's what I don't have to tolerate. You never have to tolerate intolerance. Tolerance has limits. So even though you may be inclusive of other people who you disagree with, that doesn't mean you just have to lay back and allow them to steamroll you and take away your rights. But this pastor that we saw on Fox News, he wasn't the only right-wing snowflake who was triggered by this, because Tomi Lahren, one of the right's biggest hypocrites and snowflakes herself, also decided to voice just how offended she was.
Well, who is she to judge how often our vice president should speak to his Lord and Savior? Who is she to mock anyone for their faith? These people are really, really amazing to me because they preach day in and day out about tolerance and love for everyone, right, except conservative Christians. And then they can mock you and it's funny and you're something that they can use for their jokes around the table and they can all cackle about it. It's really disgusting, not surprising, but disgusting.
If you want Joy Behar to be quiet, just say that maybe someone is speaking to Allah and Allah talks back. She would not be mocking that.
No, of course not. And that's exactly the thing with these ladies, is that in the next segment, they'll probably talk about how horrible our president and our vice president is. But in the segment prior to that, they mock Christians. Again, they live in a world where men can be women, women can be men. But if you're a conservative Christian, you have a mental illness. There's something wrong with the women at that table, for sure.
You know, I just felt sorry for her. As a Christian, obviously, she doesn't know Christ. She doesn't know the joy and the love that he provides to so many people. And so it just made me feel sorry for her.
I think she's Jewish, isn't she?
So again, we see the same arguments being made here, that we'd have no problem if a Muslim claimed that Allah was talking to them. Not true. She also implies that we're expected to tolerate intolerance. Also not true. And we live in a reality world where men can be women, but that book with talking snakes, that's the reality. But our world, the world that we're living in, that's not the real world. Now, we are tolerant of transgender people because the way that they live their lives doesn't affect how we live our lives. However, again, what you guys try to do on the right is you impose your religious views and try to get them codified into law. That affects how everyone else lives their lives, hence why you see the pushback frequently. And religious people persistently continue to push their religion on everyone else, not just socially, but politically and legislatively as well. And yes, I admit that I am mocking their religion here, but you'd think that Tomi Lahren, someone who popularized use of the word snowflake, would have thick skin and wouldn't be so easily offended or triggered by someone who dared to say something that they disagree with, but it looks like she's just as snowflakey as her millennial peers she frequently lambasts. So the reason why I think it's important to shine a spotlight on these right-wing SJW-triggered little snowflakes is because it's not just the left, it's not just kids on college campuses who get offended by the most benign comments ever. It's also right-wingers. So yes, SJWs on the left are definitely a problem. I'm not going to deny that. But we also have to acknowledge the reality of the situation, that there are a lot of SJWs on the right who also are just as easily offended. And look, if you think that Mike Pence claiming that Jesus talks to him isn't problematic, then you're the one living in a fantasy world. So stop getting offended by everything, snowflakes, grow up, and have some thicker skin. That's what you tell us, right? Don't be offended by everything. Well, you should take your own advice, Tomi Lahren and right-wingers generally speaking, because you guys are just as easily triggered at everything.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.